Dear students, today we will be taking up another important topic of ancient Indian political thought. This is the features of ancient Indian political thought. As is well known that ancient India spreads over a vast area geographically, and also from the perspective of time, it covers many centuries. We may say that right from the days of the Mehrgarh Civilization in 8000 BC, ancient India continued till 10th century AD. So, it denotes quite a number of centuries, in fact, quite a number of millennia. Now, if we focus on the entire period, it would be difficult to grasp the features because there have been many ups and downs in the history, and so the features vary from one period of time to another. So, for convenience of our discussion, we will divide the features of ancient Indian political thought into two discussions. The first one will be focusing upon the pre-Vedic civilization, that is the Mehrgarh civilization and the Harappan civilization, followed by the Vedic civilization, and the second discussion will be focusing upon the post-Vedic civilization. Let us begin with the first discussion, that is the first part of ancient Indian political thought, which roughly began from 8000 BC. We have now understood that Harappan civilization had a predecessor in the form of Mehrgarh civilization. It was excavated in late 20th and early 21st century, and it has been known to us that in the modern day Balochistan of the state of Pakistan, there evolved a highly civilized culture and administration at around 8000 BC. Let us discuss first the features of this Mehrgarh civilization. We can now say from the artifacts that have been excavated from that particular site that Mehrgarh civilization belonged to the age of new stone, or what is popularly called the neolithic age. That is, the people at that time knew the use of stone. They could make several tools for the betterment of their life, but for that purpose they principally used stone. Second, regarding the Mehrgarh civilization, it was basically a rural kind of civilization where people developed quite an advanced kind of agriculture. In fact, the Mehrgarh civilization is regarded as the first site of agriculture, at least so far as South Asia and Southeast Asia are concerned. So, the people developed a rural economy based on agriculture. Third, people also knew herding, that is, they were used to cattle rearing and sheep rearing, and so this site may be described as a civilization where people so many years back were able to develop a kind of economy where agriculture and cattle rearing were the principal components. Finally, we may say that towards the end of the Mehrgarh civilization, that is at around 4500 BC and 4000 BC, the people knew the use of bronze and copper, and some artifacts indicated that they probably at that time were able to make a transition from the Neolithic age to the Chalcolithic age, that is from the use of stones to the use of bronze and copper. So, Mehrgarh civilization gives us these features from which we know that people at that time were able to develop a civilization, quite an advanced one, but primarily it was a kind of rural civilization, as agriculture and herding were the principal components. But it should also be mentioned that we know that from at around 3500 BC, there developed almost near the places of Mehrgarh in Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Lothal, and in the adjoining areas, which incidentally also belong to the modern day Pakistan, people were able to develop a highly advanced urban civilization. In fact, we may note down the features of the Harappan civilization in this manner. First, it was a highly developed urban civilization with advanced town planning and municipal governance. Second, people were engaged in trading and other mercantile activities even with far-off countries, and this is evident from the seals that have been discovered from those sites, and so they were able to develop some kind of an advanced economy. Third, people were able to construct large houses as well as relatively smaller houses that show that they had a highly advanced kind of architectural designing and planning. At the same time, the existence of both large houses and the small houses indicate that probably there was a kind of stratification in their society where the rich and those who were privileged were able to live in the large houses, and on the contrary, those who were relatively poor lived in the smaller houses. But the fact that every house had a connection with the sanitation process and with the drinking water facility indicates that along with that social stratification, some kind of egalitarianism was probably present within that civilization. The next important feature is that the fact that the similar kinds of artifacts were available from a relatively large area indicates that probably they had a single state. Now, this single state had, however, different centers of power. So, it was not a state with a centralized power structure, but a state with multiple centers of power. So, it could be said that they had a uniform kind of political system with a complex decision-making system. So, on the one hand, a uniformity as a large state could be noticed, and at the same time, the existence of so many centers of power indicate that they had multiplicity of decision making, different strata in the process of decision making, which cumulatively constitute some kind of complex kind of decision making. The next important feature of the Harappan civilization indicates that they were able to develop an advanced measurement techniques. That is, they could measure things in quite a great detail. A touchstone with strands of gold indicate that they were able to say which particular element is gold and which is not. In fact, this is a practice that we still use today. Another important feature of the Harappan civilization is that they were able to make an advancement in medical science, particularly the aspect of dentistry. At least 9 molar crowns have been discovered from these sites, which indicate that at least extraction of tooth was made during that time. And scholars have pointed out that there are enough evidences to show that they were able to make extraction of tooth from a living person. This is quite an astonishing fact that so many years ago they were able to develop that kind of medical advancement, at least if we say or confine our discussion of medical science within dentistry. So, these features can lead us to a conclusion that the Harappan people had developed a kind of civilization which was predominantly urban, with a trading and mercantile economy, with inequality coupled with egalitarianism, with a large state and decentered power structures, with accurate measuring techniques, and finally with quite an advanced dentistry. So these were the features that inform the Harappan civilization. Now next we will be discussing the Vedic civilization. Now regarding the Vedic civilization too, it is better if we divide the Vedic civilization again into 2 categories. The first one is the early Vedic civilization, which is mainly with respect to the Rig Vedas, and the second one is the later Vedic civilization. Now, incidentally, the rise of the Vedic civilization almost coincides with the decline of the Harappan civilization. We do not, in fact, specifically know why such an advanced Harappan civilization came to an end. There have been several explanations put forward by scholars regarding the decline of the Harappan civilization, but no one is absolutely correct, and so we cannot definitely say which force or which factor was responsible for the decline of the Harappan civilization. But even then, we may say that gradually from 2500 BC, or more specifically from 1700 BC, there came about a gradual decline of the Harappan civilization. And incidentally, from that very 1700 BC, the Vedic civilization arose in the northwestern part of India, or the modern Punjab area. The Rig Veda, the earliest of the 4 Vedas, is believed to have compiled during the period 1700 BC and 1100 BC. It should be noted that the Rig Veda was compiled means that it was transmitted orally from one person to another, from one generation to another, because there was no system of codification or writing during that time. And that is why we all know that the Vedas are called the Shrutis. Anyway, from 1700 BC to 1100 BC, that is the period of the compilation of the Rig Veda, shows us that a group of people whom we refer to as Aryans came to the northwestern part of India from Central Asia, and particularly in the Punjab area, and that area has been referred to as the Sapta Sindhu. It has been mentioned as such in the Rig Veda, and these people did not have a kind of civilization that we have noticed in the people of the Harappan civilization or even in the people of the Mehrgarh civilization. In fact, the Aryans were nomadic tribes. They were not a settled community. It is doubtful that whether in the beginning they knew the art of agriculture, because they in fact traveled from one place to another, and there are evidences to show that they used to eat whatever is available to them in the form of plants or in the form of animals which they in fact killed for their own security and for getting food. So these Aryans at the very beginning were not at all an advanced or a civilized group. They were nomadic, and this is evident from the various hymns and verses that we find in the Rig Vedas. We find that this particular tribe had many layers of assemblies. At least we know 5 such assemblies from the Rig Veda. The first one is the Sabha, the second one is the Samiti, the third one is the Vidatha, the fourth one is the Gana, and the fifth one is the Parisad. Now these assemblies developed or evolved one after another. For instance, the Sabha and the Vidatha were the earliest known assemblies. In these assemblies, all the people belonging to the Aryan tribe could participate, could discuss, and we in fact come across women participating in these assemblies. In fact, there were instances where some women came to occupy the position of headship in the sabhas, and they were known as sabhapatis. But gradually, these tribal assemblies led to a series of other kinds of assemblies which were also tribal but with some restrictions. For instance, the Samiti. Samiti is also a kind of tribal assembly which evolved chronologically in a later part of the early Vedic period. In fact, in the Rig Veda, we come across both the Sabha and the Samiti, but Sabha is chronologically prior to Samiti. And we know that in Samiti, women were not allowed to participate. So, gradually there arose some kinds of restrictions which again indicate the gradual evolution of some kinds of stratifications in the society. This is true not only with respect to women, this is true also with respect to another major stratification which we find in the later Rig Vedic period. It is said that the Prajapati Brahma had given birth to 4 kinds of people. Those who came out from his head came to be known as the Brahmanas. Those from his shoulder, the Kshatriyas. Those from his thighs, the Vaishyas. And those from his heels were the Shudras. So, in this way, the stratification was made. And incidentally, those who were not born out of Prajapati Brahma were the Panchamas or the untouchables. And a tremendous inhuman kind of treatment was gradually seen to be hurled upon the Panchamas or the untouchables, which in fact, however, took a particular shape in the later Vedic period. Now, so far as the early Vedic period is concerned, apart from the tribal assemblies, the 5 kinds of tribal assemblies that I have mentioned, we must look into the political organization. We have found that there were 3 kinds of political groups. The lowest one was the Grama, whose head was called the Gramani. The second one, or the middle one, is the Visha, whose head was called Vishapati, and the topmost one was the Jana, whose head was called the Jeshtha. So this is a three-tier political structure that we could notice in the early Rigvedic period. It is here to be mentioned that territoriality, or the concept of territory, was absent during the early Rigvedic period. At that time, these political organizations coincided with tribes or clanship and not with a particular territory. So, although the institution of Raja or Rajanna gradually arrived, it is doubtful whether this institution had any relation with a particular territory. Actually, the Raja in the early Vedic period was a kind of headman of a particular tribe, and in this way there were several tribes and there were several rajas or kings. Now, we have come to know from the anthropological sources that there arose constant fight, conflict between these kinds of tribes, and exactly that thing happened in the case of the early Vedic civilization. And gradually the Aryan tribe was able to establish its superiority or dominance over the other tribes, and gradually the territories of the other tribes got to be accommodated within the territory of the Aryans, and in this way a territorial state gradually evolved. But that happened probably in the later Vedic period. In the early Vedic period, we come across the kind of infighting, the kind of conflict between different tribes, which were basically kinship-based tribes, that is, the families of a single ancestor participated in or formed that particular kin group. Now, so far as the family is concerned, there are absolutely two diverging views that we come to know from the scholars of the early Rigvedic period. Some are of the opinion that the families in the Rigvedic period were large joint families, where the families of both the father's side and the families from the mother's side lived together, and in this way, generation after generation, families from both the groom's side and from the bride's side lived under a single roof as a very large joint family. Although some scholars are of the opinion, and in fact this is the diverging view from the earlier one, that no, the early Vedic civilization did not have such a large joint family kind of organization, but rather relatively smaller families, because at that time there was no surplus production, as the economy was not in a good shape, and therefore it was better for them if they lived in separate places in separate ways. Now, coming to two other aspects. The first one is the rituals and the religion of that time. Now, it is difficult to conclude exactly their religious practices, although we know that the Rigvedic hymns leading to the later Vedic hymns form ultimately the kernel of the modern Hindu philosophy or the Hinduism as such. But during the early Rigvedic period, people normally worshipped the sun, the air in the form of Varuna, Agni, and these natural forces formed their modes of worship, which is in fact quite common in early civilizations, and it has been found to be the practice of other civilizations belonging to Mesopotamia or Egyptian and others. So this is with respect to the kinds of religious practices. Coming to the concept of equality, it can be said that the early Rigvedic civilization was to a large extent an egalitarian one, where women and other later underprivileged people could participate, and in fact privileges and distribution of resources were not done in an inegalitarian manner in the early Rigvedic period, but gradually that led to a kind of society where inequality replaced the early egalitarianism. Now, the question of equality, inequality that disturb the modern mind should be mentioned. Is it true that the Aryan civilization replaced quite an egalitarian Harappan civilization? Were the Aryans highly hierarchical and stratified? These questions, in fact, were the debates of modern time. It cannot be said with affirmative conclusion that Aryans were hierarchical or they were not. But it can be said that the early Vedic Aryans or the early Vedic civilization did not see the kind of social stratification, the kind of hierarchical power structure, the kind of unequal gendered relations, and the kind of inhuman treatment to the untouchables, and which in fact began to develop in the later Vedic period. So, the early Vedic civilization was more egalitarian, more on the line of the Harappan civilization, which was totally disturbed during the later Vedic civilization.